Okay, so here we go. Oh no, I'm probably live streaming already because I hit live streaming, but it takes a little while before I get the confirmation that I'm live. So hello, Meandering Mystic Tote and Oswald Spengler. Yeah, that's good. Variegated. I'm kind of riffing on a few things. The lunar Shakti for this lunar cycle. One of the names, she's known as Bodhi Ma. She has a bunch of names, Visvamata, but one of Visvamata is kind of Sanskrit for variegated mother. But I've also, just been hearing some different voices, more feminine voices in the past couple of days. So I just kind of got the idea of, working with variegated, and then with the voices. So that's where variegated came up with. That's kind of, usually I'll kind of pick a title out of wherever, kind of a direction I think I'm going. But I forgot I was doing a stream tonight. Around 7:30, I remembered I was doing a stream. And so I'm gonna wait for some inspiration. Did have the candles and the incense going. Excuse me. And was giving CW Chanter a little listen to. He's live right now, and I figured, because sometimes he'll say things, and he can either inspire me in one way to want to comment more on something, or he might say something I disagree with, and then I can riff on that. But it was relatively. He's on somebody else's show, so he's doing a live stream of him being on a show. And so I just thought, maybe an idea would cross my mind. Have a synchronicity. But I didn't get a synchronicity. Hello, Soul Traveler. Anyway, so Oswald, I appreciate your putting in your definition of variegation in there. Yeah, Fox Dre minutes ago. I'm still just kind of jabbering away here. But I was commenting that part of the title, Variegated, is riffing on a little bit of the lunar cycle Dakini, Bodhi Ma, Visvamata, or variegated mother. And it's actually it's a rare time. Apparently, it's something that doesn't happen every year, and that's the moon rising in the scales. Where with astrology, because they're working on a 360 kind of template as opposed to the real sky, there are years that when the new moon arises, it doesn't arise in the scales, even though other people say, oh, we're in Libra now. Libra is a very small constellation. And the one that it usually is coming out of, Virgo, is the largest constellation. So sometimes you can have it do a double duty in Virgo, or it skips right through the scales and ends up in Scorpio. Or the Scorpion. No, you didn't miss anything. Hello, Niche. But we had to hit. I know I used Stellarium, the cheating tool. But then I guess it was probably the second night. And it was cloudy here. I couldn't see the new moon, so I opened Stellarium, and I saw that moon in the sign of the scales. So I said, okay, I think that's a go for that. We have her for a shift this year, and we do. Yeah, it really is different looking at the sky, even if you either naked eye, which is the original way, where it all came from. Hello, Blue Blood. But Stellarium is a very accurate piece of software. You can enter in, like I found out what the latitude and longitude was where I live, and I entered that in it. So when I'm looking at its interpretation of the sky, it's as if I was outside, and I use that. Sometimes I'll just, okay, let me get what the constellations are facing this way, and then I'll go outside and face them and kind of help myself learn the sky by knowing what I'm looking at. And it's not, you know, I live in a small town, but there's still bigger towns around, so there's enough light pollution where you just really don't get the night sky the way it really can be viewed. But I did use stellarium, so anyway, we have basically a rare year where this particular lunar Shakti is on duty, is on shift. So it's been what an interesting time in the, you know, the circuit. Some call it a community. Sometimes I call it a community. But, you know, of course, you know, the normal distractions. People like Corey Good, but there's a lot more juice to the story, unfortunately. The story of, you know, the abuse, the, you know, terrorism light, the gang stalking, doxing, harassment that Groovy Bean underwent after leaving the Blue Chicken cult. You know, and what happens to somebody once they're a part of the Dark Alliance. That story, you know, was coming out last year. Groovy was putting it out. Moose was following up on it in the Moose Lodge. And, you know, at that time, the story just didn't seem to have the human factor, shall we say. But this time around it has, so it's gotten around. CW had her on a few nights ago where she really went through it. Had her on again last night, which I was, you know, a part, you know, I sat in, represented. And, so, you know, so the little less depth of the story, but to me, you know, if there's going to be a story around a knucklehead like Corey Good, why not be the, you know, the real slime? So that's and then, you know, in meeting the voices of women. You know, even as this whole scene was unfolding and Groovy's story was coming to the center, you know, and who might have Groovy on their show next, you know, and help her out. And I just realized that decision-making process was largely in the hands of men. When I looked around, I said, well, gee, you know, she's already been on CW, that's a male. You know, it would be really cool if Daniel from the Dark Journalist had her on, but that's a male. Or even Walter Bosley, another male. And as I was looking around, I was realizing that, you know, for her to get her story out, she was kind of like going to have to, some other, you know, largely, you know, because of the circuit we're in and the content creators in that, that it was just kind of interesting. So I was really glad when CW introduced this woman, Karen Newman, 2 nights ago, and she was on again last night with Groovy and with Occult Priestess. And how it was really pleasant to sit with women that I have, you know, that I respect from you know, the whole rising divine feminine, and realizing how challenging that is. You know, much of whatever that looked like has been quite hidden. And then, you know, with the trying to regain the equality in the modern world, you know, there's nothing but toxic masculinity. You know, the world is run by warlords. And so the kind of, it's just as, you know, there's a lot of toxicity in the public space, regardless of gender. Kind of, you know, part of the ecosystem. but this to be with Groovy Bean, a woman who's really undergone enormous challenges and has kept her dignity, and to me that's showing up. That's showing up pretty great. An occult priestess, and and also with the case of sharing space with them, how there was just a real good job of listening on everybody's part, and then and then responding to the things they heard. But there was a real sense of people being fairly happy with who they were, a sign of real empowerment, and which made sharing easy because and even pleasant, because everybody knew what they wanted to share, and they wanted to share it. But there was, I guess, nobody felt in a sense where if they didn't share the thing, that there was any loss of value. There's some really, I was very happy to be with people who are seeming to be empowered and comfortable being who they are. The aristocracy has all kinds of bizarre mythos that they like to live by because it paints them in a good picture. They like the cosmology where they're something special. Where, concepts where things like mandate from heaven, it has like some kind of gravitas. Ooh, that sounds important. It's supposed to sound important. That's the whole game. So, yeah, so that's another reason why I had to start half an hour late, because I realized, oh, I have to do a show, so I wasn't fluffy. I needed to get fluffy. And hoping that the shower would bring some inspiration. I really just was kind of like, what am I going to, say tonight? What's a fresh perspective? Hello, Deborah Gale. And usually I can almost always, usually it's kind of fun. But we'll see. Been really interesting, in some of the live chats lately, because the people who are showing up, again, people, authors, and other, people, like Walter Bosley's an author, and a character, and I think I like Walter. Cliff High, Cliff High is like a phenomenon. Cliff High is Cliff High, like a force of nature. And you have dark journalists, and all these people are showing up in the chat recently. So it's really been interesting, because in that sense, it's almost like, all right, now the gang's all here. It's not just the people who do chats and the people who make videos. It's kind of mixing up, and that has a community feel to it. Yeah, it is a little on the fluffy side tonight. Oswald. And so, and I, usually I'll have a few more people watching, but once again, CW's live, and that, I think that's totally cool with me. Once again, he's doing his radio show, and it's a different scene there. My music, doing well, writing some songs. Actually got a melody for a chorus for a song that I never was expecting. And it showed up last night. So, and then one of the people that I interacted with about rib. Oh yeah, right. That red pill moment. Right, right. Yes, I'm aware of that one. Yeah, I mean, the sacred. It's really kind of hard for sacred, to expect a sacred feminine without a sacred masculine dance partner, which is also why, when I look out into the world and I see a lot of, not a lot of divine feminine, and certainly not in the way of divine masculine, but once again, there's so few examples of it. So those who are pulling it off have really largely done through inner work and self-value, and that natural sense of sovereignty and personal power that comes when we do that inner work. And anybody who kind of sits in a place of personal power, so they're not driven by vanity and other kinds of ways to make themselves feel more valued, you start to sit in your more divine nature. Yeah, MGTOW, men going their own way. I mean, I jokingly, for all intents and purposes, I am a MGTOW man. But in many, it's more of a sacred calling, and in many ways, doing the ladies a favor. Sometimes it's just a time of going, you know what? I should probably spare anybody any more of the communication challenges that arise. And so, for me, I think, yeah, I certainly, and I know the politics, but I am very aware of the court systems and how they're tweaked. And and then there's also, well, let's call it modern, I'll call it modern personal grooming fashion. And Wizzy ain't on board with it. So, and apparently, being with somebody your own age is no guarantee they haven't started a romance with a razor. So, for me, there are any number of reasons for me to really be content with my own company is really what it boils down to. Being MGTOW isn't like, ooh, women. Not at all. Not at all. I should give myself a break and give them a break. Yeah, the MGTOW guys are annoying. I've listened to the whole thing about the courts. I agree with the meat, but to go on and on, especially like people like the Sandman. Oh, just to hear his voice. The Sandman's voice is like sandpaper on my eardrums. Good evening, Lady Zaga. So yeah, so that's, for me, there's something as well thought out. There's like the fact there's a MGTOW movement. That's goofy to me. Good evening, Matt Finger. The fact that there's a MGTOW discussion, there wouldn't be MGTOW without a MGTOW discussion. But a movement? Oh, please. That's just an echo chamber. And in many ways, it's like if you'd have to, I'm a little bit older than some of the people here. So in the Little Rascals, they had the Woman Haters Club. And of course, the main, the guys are there. But of course, the two males, Spanky and Alfalfa, and they formed the Women's Haters Club. And, barely, Alfalfa's barely in a day, and Darla's giving him the goo-goo eyes, and he's returning them. So that earned him a paddling from the Man Haters Club. The He-Man Woman Haters Club, that's what it was. And that's what the MGTOW movement kind of reminds me of a little bit. A little kind of like a Little Rascals comedy skit. Sam Vaknin, huh? You know, to me, we need to transition to sanity, and sanity would look largely equal because everybody be bringing their best game, and when everybody's bringing their best, generally the genders are fairly well balanced. Hello, Vernon. You know, back when what they call the matriarchal days, it was really more like when the days of the goddess. Life was more sane then, and you could build a village in a nice place and not on a high hill because warfare was not how nice people lived as a people. Yeah. It was interesting. The Thunderbolts project had some speaker who, and his only topic was the subject of Mars, from a mythological perspective. And it was just very interesting in reading about the energy of Mars. Not only the anger, but also the fact that being known as pimply and its inflammation. And how much listening to this, you know, professor, I guess, talk about, you know, in the mythic properties of Mars, and then as myself as an herbalist and a, you know, essential oil, and what the energetic properties of all these things are. And you know, you have a plant like basil. Basil is under the dominion of Mars. Black pepper is in that. Cinnamon is there. You know, there are a lot of the more antibiotic herbs are Martian herbs. And how, you know, even when you're doing humors, you know, like, you know, the various qualities that you want to keep balanced, kind of like what they do in acupuncture and acupressure. How the, you know, the red energy is inflammatory. And how if you wanted to create heat, you would use red. I mean, it was just really amazing to hear a scientist speaking about mythos and, you know, different mythological characters, like Heracles was tied into Mars, and that Mars wasn't just the god of war, it was also the rage. And in almost every case of these Martian heroes, they were known to go into this battle fury where they killed friend and foe alike. So just that kind of reckless, murderous rage. And it's kind of, it really gets clear that although Saturn may set up all the rules of state and the rigidity of it, it is Mars that's the enforcer. Mars is the one that keeps the rules of Saturn. And when it's in the mood for killing, friend or foe doesn't matter. Killing is the nature of Mars. At the psychological level, the interesting thing about studying plants under the dominion of Mars is they don't have a psyche, so they don't pick up all that ugly stuff. They just get, you know, the kind of energizing energy, the antibiotic energy. Again, antibiotic means anti-life. So it's just, it was interesting. It's been a very archetypal time for me, and being in that space does not lend to language. It's just probably why after a few days of kind of being in that space, and then it's like, oh, it's language time. It's like, oh, right. Thank you, Blue Blood. But Saturn and Mars are certainly two good topics. If you want to be a little esoteric on looking at the world and the influences. Because what really prevents freedom are all the statutes, the systems. That's why we're not free to roam the earth. That's Saturn and the systems. But those laws cannot self-enforce. It is not the things written on books that pose the danger to our freedom. No, it is those who enlist in the role, the martial roles. And that's soldiers and law enforcement. Once again, the key word is law enforcement. Saturn makes the laws, Mars enforces it. And it's really those two forces that prevent freedom on the earth. As far as external forces, the primary blocking force is our own consciousness. Of course, our consciousness gets invaded by those forces. That's why there's validity in astrology, because they're kind of giving you clues how the mark of the beast is working on you. For me, the mark, my little, when I'm referring to the mark of the beast, I'm referring to one's natal chart. That imprint we receive at our first breath, that puts us in some kind of resonance with the archontic planets and the fuckery that they can generate our way. But once you realize about how that game is played, well, you can kind of step outside that. But this kind of, you get handed your fate, and then you create your own destiny. And the fates, for all intents and purposes, are the planets, the astrological planets, and their fuckery. But of course, sometimes you have, this is well aspected, and you got Jupiter, the beneficial planet, benefic. Because there's a whole game being played there, being called fate. And if we unless we free ourselves from those gods, you kind of get stuck in the fate system. And once you realize the game they're playing, it's a little bit easier to step out of that world and into the dreaming, which is part of the whole point of the Telestic or Telestic living, is acknowledging the planetary animal mother, Gaia Sophia, that she's dreaming our reality, and we can co-dream that. And once you step into the dreaming, then you're taking yourself out of the clutches of fate. Totally immune? Only time will tell. After all, this whole human thing is an experiment, and Sophia's correction is a continuation of that experiment, kind of really picking up again, and with us, the human animal, playing its part in that experiment and in that correction, provided it is aware of that correction. And I'm quite sure there's ways of making use of unaware, using people in mysterious ways. said it, I guess, a few months ago. Mars seems to be changing, though. I don't think Mars is changing of its own volition. I think the agency of Gaia has gotten greater, and you know, if you have two planets, kind of roughly, you know, let's finish Venus and Mars being equidistant in however one composes the sky. Who are you gonna take out, the murderer or the slut? Who are you going to deal with first? So it seems to me Mars was definitely the one to turn her gaze to first, get him to mellow out. Then she can deal with the tart. But yeah, to look into Mars is more of it, just almost like the way I feel like the plants get that martial energy, without all the psychopathy. Because I mean, you know, when it comes especially to the active performance of psychopathy as opposed to the planning, it's kind of like, you know, Saturn would be kind of like, to me, the planning of psychopathy. Mars is the execution of it. Yeah, I find it fascinating. There's hardly, I don't know if there's any government programs that are actually straight and honest with us and tell us how they're really spending the money that they got from the taxpayers. So, oh yeah, and I guess, well, it was interesting doing my Blue Chicken Saturday Night Special. I think that's what it was. I kind of did that. That seemed, you know, that was recent. It was 2 nights ago. So that's why, I mean, I actually was picking around. I'd done a relatively long call. I got off it and I'm going, I was going to go to the store. I go to the store. Let's do this. And then finally, oh my, I have a show tonight. And yeah. So the real Martians were badges? Yeah, there's some funny looking stuff to those to the moon footage. I have to admit, I mean, I still, you know, it's not like I'm not interested in all that stuff, but you know, again, when the amount of fuckery going on in the world, I mean, I'm talking about the stuff that could actually, you know, like affect us, like possibly create some discomfort in our lives. NASA's not one of my problems. I mean, I think that never a straight answer. I think it's a great way of explaining NASA. Yeah, I mean, I've just seen, you know, supposedly some outtakes where whoever's coming out jumps down and then something falls in him and he's, oh, you hear him say, oh shit, and whatever. But once, you know, we got a plate full of challenge, right in the right here and now. You know, just constant ridiculousness that needs to come to an end. And Max, Max Egan really kind of week after week just reminds everybody that this whole system is held up. The system we hate is held up by our participation and support. A general strike would cripple the ones who benefit from our servitude very, very quickly. And with the tiniest little bit of strategy, and everybody going, yeah, we're going to do this, nobody would miss a beat. Nobody. Matter of fact, there'd probably be room. Depending on what time of year, I would recommend the good weather. So if we take off for a week, everybody can have picnics in their backyard. If we withdrew our services, and that's just it, well, how am I going to get gas? No, we're all staying home, but we were planning to stay home for a week. So we all went to the store and we got what we need in our refrigerator, in our cupboards, whatever, and now we can take a week off. And the cashiers in the supermarkets can also be part of the strike because we don't need them. We already bought what we needed. We don't plan on traveling, so whatever gas we have in our car that we ever need to go, but basically we're planning to stay home for a week. And that means everybody could stay home because there's no business. And of course, the beginning deals would be based on that we're still the same stupid masochists that we've always been. So just a little acknowledgement, and we're ready to give up the farm. Now, if people go in well informed and knowing, no, you need to capitulate, and at the very minimum, that means you remember you're our representatives. You work for us. You are not our leaders. You're not our leaders. You represent us. And when we remember that, when we remember to represent for ourselves enough, that the people that we hire to represent us in other places we hold to a standard. Again, the reason why they're not representing us is because we ain't representing. We really are not. As a group, as a humanity, as the oppressed billions against the whatever, hundreds of thousands maybe at the most. I mean, you take away their minions and they're almost uncountable. It's their minions, and their minions are who? Hired from the plebes. All of their protection comes from the plebes. They don't have like some kind of warrior class in the elite. No. Why do that? Throw one of us a couple of bucks and we'll shoot our brothers and sisters for you. Problem solved. And that's where we have to look in the mirror. That the ones who would keep us from freedom are our brothers and sisters who were hired to keep us from freedom. Then the ones who control the world, they don't even do their own dirty work. We do their dirty work to ourselves. And we think that they're a problem? As long as they get away, they're getting away with it. And how do they get away with it? Because we enable them. And when that shit stops, their game is over. Even with like Corey Good, I think he's a complete scam. But I think the people who fell for a scam are not to be pitied. Any more than somebody who eats McDonald's is to be pitied. If you like to eat shit, help yourself. And that's how I feel about Corey Good. If you're willing to consume that slop away. Because it isn't about his story. It's about the emptiness inside. It's about that need for somebody to come along and save the day. Some outside agency. I would tend to agree with that, Lady Zaga. I mean, if nothing else, the spooks are always interested in mind control, and anytime you have a group of people who have a story that they believe in, and it comes from one source. This is how religions work. It's the same thing where there is almost the equivalent of a divine revelation, and it has a messenger. And it's the messenger basically always has a message of what? Salvation. So to me, we would expect the spooks to be there. It's like, not seeing the spooks involved in something like that would be like, finding a pile of shit outside without flies on it. One of my softer metaphors. And we cannot be empowered without responsibility. We can't be empowered while being victims. We cannot be victims and empowered. We can be one or the other. And so, the people who have fallen for the Corey Good story, I don't see them as victims. I just see them as consumers, consuming poorly. I see them consuming poorly because there's a huge hole in their being that wants to be filled with something of value. And that real thing that needs to be filled is our own value of ourself. That kind of, I'm okay with me and God's okay with me. And, in this case, in my case, God is goddess. But, it's the same, it's that same space in our psyche. So people are really empty. Religion, the main religions have a story that's so holy you could drive trucks through it. So people reject that. There's all kinds of quote unquote occult traditions, but the ones that you generally find are I don't know, the witchy poo sides of religions. So people have an emptiness, a gaping hole and coming from lack of self-validation. And that's a very disempowered place to be. And being Telestic is about being empowered. And you're empowered through your gnosis, and also you're empowered by the power sharing that the planetary animal mother does with her anthropos. It's all about power sharing, because you can't co-create without sharing that creational power. A former Mormon, huh, Fox and Dre? It was funny, somebody last night asked, do Masons wear magical underwear? So I just said, because I know a little bit about Masons. I said, no, but they do have an overgarment. That would be their apron. Yeah, there is a great sadness at the world level. And at least the tone I pick up on it is, this beautiful relationship that was once the sacred one that all of humankind had with the earth was broken. The simplest and most profound of relationships, the one to our environment and the very earth we live on. And that was taken. And that beautiful bond between the planet and all the beings that lived on her, the greater family. With the humans, that bond was broken, and that is a cause of great sadness. And a big part of what I like to think we Gnostics are doing is rebuilding that bond. I mean, one of the subtitles of John Lamb Lash's book, Not in His Image, is part of one of the things in there is deep ecology. And one of the things that Planetary Tantra is about is deep ecology. I have felt once good, or more than once, felt good about being sad, and the word I use for that is bittersweet, where I'm recounting something that is bitter, but the wisdom gained through that bitter experience is sweet. And that's how I actually really, that's how, I mean, it's funny, it's a word, but when I was trying, I remember, I said, how would I describe this feeling? I'm like, this is bittersweet. Which makes me very unhappy I didn't go out to the store today because I'm all out of chocolate, talking about bittersweet. It's the one stressful thought that has arisen this evening is, you have no chocolate tonight. Hello, Jorge. And I have some nice dark chocolate, 88% chocolate. Love that dark chocolate. And it's been on sale too, 2 for $5. They've been out of the green and black's organic, but at least this one's no GMO. It's the endangered species brand of chocolate. I ate a whole bar last night after I put myself down, put myself in bed. I put that first square in my mouth, let it melt, and it becomes like a sacrament. Chocolate makes some very pleasant neurohormones. I like chocolate. But I tend to do it when I go to bed. It's kind of like when I'm settling in, I'm going to get into my communion aspect. It's like, let me put some chocolate in my mouth so I can share the deliciousness of that with the goddess. Because I'm big on kind of feedbacking, you know, knowing that we got that spark of the divine within us, and with all these senses. And it's like, so when something tastes really good or smells really good or beautiful breeze, I try to remember that that we feed back into some big intelligences that kind of depend on our sensory system to give them some of those delicious moments. So I like to be a conduit to them. I like carob too. Carob is good. But I won't be smelling any of my roses here for a couple of months now. I have to admit, I thought my kale, we've had a few frosts here now, and I thought my kale wouldn't make it through the frost, but this year on the border of my garden, there's a lot of white quartzite in this area. So I have a border of a lot of white quartzite stones. And it's not quite in a rectangle. It's kind of a rectangle that turns into a soft pentagon at the top. So we're kind of eliminating some of that right angle energy. And my kale has not frozen yet. So I have a feeling that the presence of those quartzite crystals, and then the spirit of the gnome in the garden. His name is Sagamog. It's kind of like sagacious gnome, and so he's lending some good juju into the garden. I plan to expand it for next year. Yeah, I was going to go to the store today, but then, it was a conversation got, I thought I was going to have, conversations often go hour very quickly. It was multiple hours. And it was cool today. Tomorrow it's supposed to be in the 60s. I'm going to, I have to walk to the store, so I'd much rather walk in the 60s. Today it was like, I don't know, high 40s, low 50s. I don't like cool weather. Not at all. My skin doesn't like it. All of those beautiful breezes I like to send back to our creators. When I'm in this kind of weather, I don't have any nice breezes to send them back. The honeysuckles have all died, so I don't have those places to stop and smell the honeysuckles. Although last week when I walked to the store, there were some late blooming honeysuckles. I was walking by and went, what's that scent? And I turned over, I looked to my left, and there was some honeysuckle growing on a fence. So I went over and got a couple of snootfuls. So I'm rambling a little bit tonight. It's just, apparently that's the kind of night it is. Kind of variegated topics. And of course, I guess you might have all seen that I did a little show with Moose the other night. He hasn't been heard from too much lately, so it was good to hear from him. I best as I can, and got some, got good response in the video, fair amount of comments, good comments. Oh yeah, honeysuckle. Oh, it's delicious. It's so funny, when I walk down to the store, on one side I walk under these two beautiful magnolia trees, and magnolia trees have a canopy that, no sun gets through when it's raining, and barely any rain gets through. So they create their own little tunnel when you're walking underneath them. And I noticed that when I walked through there, I would smell honeysuckle, and then I realized the honeysuckles were growing on the other side of the street, but somehow the breeze was blowing the scent, and because of the humidity and whatever the weather underneath that magnolia canopy was, it held the scent of the honeysuckle. And it was just like the honeysuckle was an atmosphere, and it just, oh, it was. And so when, you know, walking to the store, I would pause and just take in the scent for a while, and then when I came back, I'd look forward to that. And it always smelled better across the street than going directly to it, because it was gathering, and it was picking up a little humidity from being under the tree canopy. It was just perfect. Oh, it was wonderful. So, and oh, the dramas in the world and the national scene. Oh my! At my forum, the One Truth Forum. Oh man, it has gotten, I don't know, fairly insane. What people identify, what one group calls propaganda, and other people calls news. What one calls news, and other propaganda, and there's, what a strange climate in the world, but especially in the United States. Like I said, you know, I've been through a lot of presidencies. There's not a single president that I've been through that I wasn't holding my nose through a lot of their terms. I wouldn't point at anyone, oh, he wasn't so bad. You know, we're running the biggest military machine in the world. If you choose to be the CEO of that unit, even if you are a good person, probably isn't gonna matter for much. I mean, you can't really expect to be president or CEO of this country and be able to come away looking good. But the One Truth is like, it's actually kind of like censorship about what they, you know, it's strange. It's a strange climate. It's like one group of people drank a spiked punch, and they're seeing things that I can't see. Hello, any among us? So that's a little disheartening. That, you know, I mean, again, I don't put forums are kind of clunky because it's all about text, and a lot of anonymity. You know, people whose faces you'll never see, whose voices you'll never hear. And then in that, and then in those things, people think that, you know, well, I know you from the forum. How do you, you know, you might know me because I'm on a fucking camera. Yeah, it's kind of easy to know me. I put my face out there, and you can hear my voice. Not so hard to know me. And people go, oh, well, you know me from the forum. I don't know you from shit. I could sit next to you on a bus, and I wouldn't know who you were. I know you? Please, get real. This isn't Facebook. Yeah, you know, and then some people have some, let's call it alter ego usernames. Acquaintances that, you know, are superheroes or something. It was funny the other night. Could have been last night. CW said, what should I call you, Rad or Mod? It doesn't make, you know, one's a username, one's my real name. I respond to them all. Some people call me Moddy. Vernon, who you saw pop on earlier, often calls me Modrad. So, some people call me Wizzy. Some people call me Wiz. People call me Wizard. Some people call me crazy. So Windsor, are you in Australia, or that part of the world? Oh, in Texas. All right. Oh. I almost moved to Austin, Texas. Somebody supposedly had a situation that was ready for me to move into, and I was ready to do it. And then when it was time to kind of do that move and, get all the final details, I get in contact with the person who rents out the rooms. Completely different story. The person who was my middle person was kind of creating a story that didn't exist. Rents that didn't exist, terms that didn't exist, move-in times that didn't exist. So I did not move to Austin, Texas. I thought it might be a good move because it's, music and new age. And I'm a licensed massage therapist, so I thought it would be, if I'm going to move to a new area, go to an area where my skills might enable me to stay alive. Yeah, I noticed. Trust me. I feel that the reason I didn't get to Austin was because I ultimately would not have been happy. And the thing is, almost any, like Sedona, almost any New Age place that's known as New Age, they suck. Because then you have a New Age scene, and any scene comes with its darlings and its, mandarins and gurus and who's who and all the stupidity that goes with that kind of king of the hill shit. Well, that was the other, Oswald. I mean, music is, as much as I love body work, and I really love it, and I'm very skilled. Music, I can see, I wouldn't see me at a gig waiting to get my hands on a body, as opposed to having my hands on a body and couldn't be waiting to get to a music gig. So I know which is my greater love. Well, like I lived in the town of Woodstock, and I was there. The town of Woodstock. That's where the Woodstock Arts and Crafts, or Woodstock Music and Arts Festival was contrived, but it never happened. It happened 2 counties away. Woodstock is in Ulster County, and the festival happened in Sullivan County, which is a county or 2 south. But anyway, by the time I got to Woodstock, literally in like 1990, you already had, you had what happens in almost any scene where there's an organic scene, and then you just have the regular people showing up, and then you have the people who realize there's now a whole crowd of people that could probably use some services. So the people with the wherewithal come and provide the services, and next thing you know, they kind of become the new elite, of so to speak. And so basically, what you would get in Woodstock is you'd have the ones who came with money, the hippies who came with money, owning the stores, and then the hippies who came for the drugs and the sex. They're stocking the shelves. Now there's a certain natural order to that. But again, these people they kind of came from Manhattan, and they came with kind of a Manhattan ethos. The yuppie, when hippies became yuppies. So that's what you kind of find in the business. When you go to Woodstock, the business owners are yippies, and all the working people are the yippies are all the business owners, and the hippies are all the workers. Like I said, there is a certain natural order to it, but again, I think you can be business savvy without being a complete asshole. I think it's possible. I do. And this is, somebody who's been on both sides and know how hard it is to get good help. Trust me. Good help. So that's why I'm glad I'm in this kind of like little town in Southwest Virginia nobody's heard about. But it's got very artsy craft scenes. I mean, we've got a couple of art galleries. I mean, it's a tiny little town. The actual town itself is a half square mile as far as, the incorporated part of it. And I think we have at least 2 art galleries in this little town from local artists. There's an artisans fair, and people, do hand-carved things, handmade food, handmade rings. I mean, it's really, it's hip. And because the business owners aren't yippies, they're just old family kind of Appalachian people who are kind of glad that there's some lively people around to kind of work with. So it's really kind of neat. I like where I am. Got good earth energy, got really great water, and good people. And, as far as like, a state or, what kind of government, I can't really relate. I'm relating to it as Earth. Like, where I am in the foothills of, of the Appalachian Mountains, of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And, that's what I'm identifying with, not as the state, the government, what kind of politics, any of that stuff. Pfft. Spongland. Oh yeah, Niche and her Adams Family house. Yeah, it's got a lot of atmosphere. Hello, Forrest. Yeah, I lived in an old farmhouse that was almost 100 years old in upstate New York, but it had a lot of rooms, so it was kind of like a boarding house. It was a farmhouse converted to a boarding house. It had a certain amount of charm. It was built really, really well, but none of that kind of Victorian charm. And even though it was fairly haunted. I wouldn't say it was haunted. It was. But it was occupied at that frequency. But it didn't have any of that kind of gothic charm, I would say. But so, I lived at 2,300 feet, pretty close to it, like a mountain ridge there. So, we got the real winds there. And this house was built originally from white pine that was cut down on the property. And when white pine cures, it almost cures into cement. And it was a 3-story house, and I occupied the two dormers. I called it my tower on the 3rd floor. And when those winds came, you could feel the kinetic pressure of the wind hit the house, but the house didn't budge. And had decent well water there too. I liked the water. I'm seeing the word ferries, and when I was younger, the only way I was living in New York before the Verrazano Bridge went up, so the only way to get to Staten Island was by the Staten Island ferry. And of course, the way you get to Martha's Vineyard is by the ferry. I like ferries. Ferries are neat. And there's something special about crossing a body of water to get to a body of land. That's real portal kind of stuff. So here I am waiting to kind of like pick up a line of thought, and I can be considering it pretty much a fail. So I might say goodnight very shortly, just because it's like, if you're not going to use the stage, get off of it. Oh, Cape May, yeah. I spent 3 summers in the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey. It was in the middle of the state, but it was as far south as Egg Harbor, or Little Egg Harbor. There's Egg Harbor and Little Egg Harbor, and that was so I was that far south, but in the center of the state rather than on the eastern shoreline where the egg harbors were. Okay, yeah. I was trying to pick up on that little by little, Windsor, but you just gave me confirmation. The fairy folk, yeah, that's I certainly enjoy the playful, kind of popular fairies. But, somebody like Kara St. Louis, who's broken into it. And then if you really read into Tolkien and what fairy was, in many ways, seems like a lot of the tales that Tolkien brought back from his states were visits to fairy. And if you go to Ireland and you listen, where they call them the Fae, you probably, in most cases, you don't want to meet them. They're not evil or bad, but they're wild, and we're not wild anymore. We're domesticated. So it's kind of like a dog meeting up with a wolf. They might get along, Certainly the potential's there. But, will the wolf really be in the mood for the silly dog? And it's kind of like what it's like with the human meeting a fairy. Do they really want to have to put up with all the yapping from this domesticated thing here? And that's probably lies at the core of why we are treated like animals by the rulers. Because we've been domesticated. And it's time to be wild. That's why I kind of like this. Where's that one little thing I have here? Where is that? Oh, I think I took it away. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. This is it. I am the integrity you lost when you became like them instead of becoming truly you. I am the wild, the bold, the fearless and joyful part of you that will always remain silent if you do not heed me now. To become like the Fae again. I mean, in many ways, civilization is synonymous with domestication. And a properly domesticated dog doesn't show its owner say, you're gone, you're done here. I'm tired of you doling out the food when you think it's okay. You get out of here. That's kind of like what it's like when the average human says, I'm tired of being controlled by all these rulers and all these other people. Well, you better get undomesticated first. Hello, Connie. And one of the easiest ways to return to the wild is to return to Mother Nature. She has never been domesticated. I haven't seen any studies, but I would like to see studies. Genealogical studies on just how certain domesticated animals showed up, like sheep, cows, but sheep and pigs. But sheep, to me, would really be interesting to see the genealogy. Because when you look at wild sheep, they have a coat like a deer. And then you look at a domesticated sheep, and it has a coat a little more like an alpaca or a llama. So I really wonder how the domesticated, fuzzy, furry, wool-bearing sheep came about. Because once again, wild sheep, they don't have coats like that. They have coats just like a deer. Yep, that's where I'm kind of going. That's where I'm kind of getting at, Lady Zaga. Because part of where I was going, again, I will call it extra Sophianic, although for me it doesn't change a thing of the Sophianic myth. It's just a little outside that conversation. whether it's Genesis or the Sumerian creation stories, I am holding to the theory. I'm developing a theory that those creation stories are speaking about the creation of Homo domesticus, I'll call it. So that way somebody like Cain, of Cain and Abel, of the Genesis, Cain would be Homo domesticus. And then when he left Eden and went to the land of Nod and took himself a wife, that was a native anthropos human. And apparently there were a whole lot of them out there. So, methinks that there, again, was a kind of a breeding program with working with material that Sophia had already provided, basically the whole genome of the planet. And some people with some tech, and doesn't have to be off-planet people. But with some tech, kind of like tech we have today, started creating domestic versions of wild things. Hello, Groovy. So for me, so when there was like the domestication of the wild sheep into the current sheep, the boar into a pig, the aurochs into a cow, and the anthropos into a golem. Not that, once again, the anthropos was already well established all over the earth. But it seems like something inferior too. Less intellectually capable. Seem to be missing a big part of the divine spark. But I just think it would be very interesting to find out how the smooth-haired wild sheep became a wool-bearing animal. And they all, it's like, it's funny, man gets civilized, which is domesticated. It's just like suddenly, these settlements, people no longer being hunter-gatherers, maybe because this new group couldn't hunt and couldn't gather because they weren't natural. And so, as a support system for this unnatural hominid thing, a whole support system of domesticated animals were created to go along with the domesticated human. It's a theory. And it's a theory that does not disturb one bit of the terma of Gaia awakening, the fallen goddess scenario, and a Sophian narrative. Because it doesn't change a thing about who we are. And I consider this part of story to be kind of an insertion. And I think those insertions are things we are able to unpack, especially once you have the Sophianic narrative, and then you start looking at some of this other stuff and go, wait a second. From the perspective of the narrative, especially with, some of these other hints, like Cain going out and marrying a wife. It's like, whether it's the the Dogon people learning from the Nomo, but the Dogon were there, or the Australian Aborigines dealing with the Pleiadians, but we were already here. seems, you know, it's real clear, even from these ones who have other creation stories, that this world was full of anthropines, and whoever was coming around, whether from another planet, from another portion of the Earth, came into certain areas, it was just loaded with the anthropos. And the anthropos was a wild part of nature. I mean, we had our cunning and our smarts and our intellect, but we were still part of nature. And to be part of nature is to be a little wild. You know, a cornered animal, they say, no matter what size, is dangerous. Well, the average cornered human isn't very dangerous. Yeah, that's very good. I agree with you, Fox Dre. Well, again, the whole chronology, the timeline, like how many years have elapsed since where we are now to this point that that an event happened. The event, you know, there's a good chance that these events did happen, but where they happened, like how long ago, on, you know, like on how many suns went around the, how many, how many revolutions around the sun have passed since that happened. The chronology is a mess. Our chronology is a real mess. On purpose. Yeah, well, that's because there isn't much fight in a domesticated animal. You know, the reason, you know, why you can lead cows to the slaughter is because they're domesticated. The reason you can make people put on a uniform and fight somebody they've never met and probably don't have a real beef with is because you're domesticated. We're domesticated. Yeah, a lot more recently. I agree, Lady Zaga. When I kind of try and feel how long ago some of these things are, they don't feel very long ago. Again, you know, when we're sometimes speaking what seems like 1,000 or 2 years, usually my feeling sense is much more in the hundreds. And Max Egan has spoken a little bit about it, but again, the one who's really commenting the most, and has made a YouTube channel of commenting on the false history, is New Earth, Sylvia Ivanova of New Earth. She's a character. She's a real character, but she's done a lot of great work and a lot of great artwork. She still presents too. And some of those shows have really sent me on journeys. And then there's a guy, Philip Druzhinin. He also does some of the alternative timeline, and he'll show things of like how it looked like there was electricity, like in Moscow in France, like, you know, the 1800s, but it was kind of like Tesla type of free energy. Wasn't massive amounts of it, but they were enough to like be able to light places and stuff, and they were just pulling it from the atmosphere. So yeah, I think I'm going to call it an early night. Although I'll be ending about the same time I normally end, which is 11 o'clock. And, but things are good. I hope it is my desire that life is good with you all out there, even in the middle of all this craziness, where one can see some rhyme and reason in all of the chaos. Well, thank you. And so that'll be this Telestic transmission. And so meta history is still up, but little by little it's going away. Nemeta is the new Gnostic portal. The Sophianic School of Arts and Sciences. A lot of the material is now behind a paywall because there's a tuition to pay, but there's still a good amount in Planetary Tantra section that's offered for free, and then also the Men Here section. He does some updates. I would definitely be a member, except it would be highly irresponsible of me financially to even find the money for that, because if I found it for that, then come a bill later on in the month, I wouldn't be able to find that. So it would be irresponsible for me at this time to become a student, but I would love to. But there's some really, I just think it's very exciting for myself. Somebody who has a great love for the ancient mystery schools, and this is kind of like a revamping of that, and what I consider to be modernly authentic. I think it's great. Okay, Zachary Taylor. No, Zachary, no, I don't. I do. Okay, I have. I've had people PayPal me money, and like I would just, my pay. If you go to PayPal, it says, send money to friends or acquaintances or family. Well, my email is radagastlmt@gmail.com. So my name, LMT, like licensed massage therapist. And, so I don't have a Patreon. They take too much. PayPal is a much better partner. Anyway, but thank you for asking, Zachary Taylor. That was very kind of you. I don't make a big habit of pulling it out, but I've definitely had people from the online world give me some assistance, and it's been so well received. And in each case, it was like, kind of going into month, how am I going to manage this? And then something happens, and this is how I'm going to manage it. So there's a certain amount of blessing and grace that gets experienced each time that happens for me also. So anyway, that's that. Once again, radagastlmt@gmail.com is if somebody were going to send something to a friend, family, or friend on PayPal, that's how they would find me. But other than that, when it comes to Soros, the rumors never end. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a fact. But all I know, I've used it over the years, and I'm not a controversial person. So I've found them, they take almost nothing for providing the service, and it allows me to, access, by moving it into my bank account and being able to write checks against it or whatever. It gets to me quick. And like I said, and PayPal only takes a small amount. I think it's under 4%. So that's very helpful. Patreon, I think, can take up to 30%. You're trying to help somebody out, and meanwhile you got a partner taking 30% for the transaction instead of 4%. Now, of course, if you're getting controversial, raging against the machine in an obvious fashion, well, then you might find, that you've gotten on radars you'd rather not be on. So I tend, I speak out whatever I want, but in a certain way it's stealth mode. Like the other night when I was going to speak out about Corey Good, I called it the blue chicken decompression. I didn't want to have any names that would identify I'm talking about Corey Good. If I'm going to talk about Corey Good, I don't want people to know about it. I don't want to advertise that I'm talking about Corey Good or David Wilcock or other slimy characters. I I don't want that kind of attention. You know, this is a Gnostic, you know, it's a channel, you know, that's hosted and, you know, and run by a Gnostic. And I comment on things other than Gnostic things, but, you know, that's kind of the tone here. So, like I said, I probably could have doubled my views on my Saturday night thing just by putting, you know, Corey Goodgate, like Corey Gate, or, you know, whatever. I know how to attract attention. I know how to be a little outrageous so that more people go, oh, let me check that out. I'm not looking for that energy. I really don't. I'm really not looking for that energy. Yeah, that's the other thing of super chat. I mean, I have anybody with over 1,000 subscribers can do super chat. And I remember when I was first nearing it, I go, oh boy, I'll be able to do super chat. And then I found out about it. I went, no. I don't, you know, if I'm going to ask, if somebody's going to help me out, I don't want them to have a partner that they're helping out almost a third as much as me. It's a ripoff, and I won't participate in a ripoff that I can opt out of. Oh, I occasionally I will use hearts too, and I didn't realize there was anything wrong with hearts. You know, and I like to say things and then put a heart on it. So anyway, okay, so that's me taking about 10 minutes to say goodnight. So thank you all, and next time, and I'm playing with putting together a video with me comparing two of my Weber speakers, but that won't be a live stream. That'll be something I record and then edit and put out as without all the messing around with microphones. Because, you know, if I'm going to do comparing speakers, it'll be like, listen to this, now let me move the microphone and listen to this, and there'd be a lot of dead time. And I think I could cut it where the whole point of where you can hear the difference between two different speakers and things like that is best done by cutting them right next to each other. So that's a project that I want to try and work with. All right, so all of the people here in the chat, all the people who will be watching this after this goes live, the warm greetings at the end as I say farewell, and all the people that show up week after week. Thank you so much for being in the live chat and interacting and making it fun. So that's going to be it. And we're going to